Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. To those who've been here before, you know the format. We honour freedom's fighters, people who over the years have, shall we say, fought the good fight for free markets and personal liberty. And tonight, none better than Ruth Lea. Now, the format is I ask the questions. After 20 minutes, we stop. No questions from the floor, but there are drinks on the floor. So, after 20 minutes, we stop. Ruth,
yes.
You're known, of course, as a feisty advocate of free markets and sound economic policy, but it wasn't always so. After childhood on a farm, you became a civil servant, including time at the Treasury.
I joined the enemy.
Well, what first impelled you to that career?
Well, it's always assumed that I'd go off to university, and I read economics and statistics at York University, when actually it was quite a young university. And then I did quantitative economics at Bristol. As you may gather, I enjoyed numbers, apart from anything else. And my supervisor at York University had worked in the Treasury. And he said, why don't you think about a civil service career? And I said, that sounds a jolly good idea.
Were you fast track?
Well, I was a statistician originally.
Okay.
And so that is equivalent to a fast track. You were an assistant.
Given your background as a farm girl, was that difficult?
No, it wasn't, because I was a natural genius.
Did you enjoy it? I was about to ask, did you enjoy it? But obviously, look.
No, I mustn't be too modest tonight. That would be most unfitting. But I did enjoy it. I found being in a civil service extremely good experience, but only for a certain period before I moved on.
You became a banker with Mitsubishi at the age of 40. That's quite a
There's no need to let them know how old I am.
I didn't say how long ago that was. But it was quite a late start. Did you ever encounter discrimination because you were a woman in a profession that's mostly male?
It was mostly men, and it was particularly the case because I was actually working for the Japanese, and I must have been the most senior woman in Mitsubishi Bank. This was up 30 years ago, by a mile. And yet the senior Japanese were always very, very courteous to me. They treated you just as a professional. Okay. They recognized your abilities, they recognized your experience, and they wanted to learn from you because that's why they were paying you. It was a very professional relationship I had with the Japanese, and I have great memories of being at Mitsubishi. I was there 5 years.
Excellent. You were with Lehman Brothers briefly.
Briefly.
Did you ever spot anything in their culture in retrospect that might have alerted you to their ultimate fate?
I think the answer to that is yes.
Ah.
And I remember in September 2008, when Lehman's actually hit the dust, so to speak, I was going to Sky TV to talk about the CBI manufacturing survey of all things. And then somebody said to me, but you worked at Lehman's, should we talk about Lehman's as well? I said, well, I think the Lehman's is a bigger story today than the CBI survey. And I said, actually, to be honest, I always thought it was a little bit on the edge, if you understand what I mean. And it was trying to compete with the big boys and Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. And it always, I thought there were chances.
Your exit was very well timed.
Well, it was 1994, so it was some time before then.
When you were head of
95.
the policy unit at the Institute of Directors, you were famously critical of Gordon Brown, who was then Chancellor, and when you were unexpectedly made redundant. And there was a big story at the time. This might have been pressure from the Labour government. Wasn't your boss knighted shortly after that?
Rumour has it, yes. And the chairman got his OBE. It was a coincidence. Not.
It is a coincidence that is on the record.
I think it was pretty obvious what had happened.
We have two things in common. First of which is that we've both been awarded the freedom of the City of London. Now, it is a traditional, though not a legal right, that you're allowed to drive a flock of sheep over London Bridge. I've often fantasized about doing it. Have you ever, in your imagination, thought of doing it?
Well, I fantasize about quite a lot of things, but never about driving sheep across London Bridge. And I don't dislike sheep. I'm very fond of sheep, and when I was on the farm, we always had a pet sheep. The first one was called Charlie, and the second one was called Charlotte.
Okay.
And Charlie went to the big field in the sky.
Okay. Well, I'll make you an offer now. Someday next June. you and I I'll hire a flock of 15 sheep, a farm in Kent, and they'll drive them up, and you and I will drive them over London Bridge together, and they'll have placards on their back saying, "Fleeced by the Chancellor." And I will give the Times an exclusive. Are you up for that?
Well, it's a bit early.
It's the only way we'd get an empty bridge.
Yeah.
And it has to be due to get enough light. Look, if you could sum up what constitutes sound economic policy in a couple of sentences, how would you do it?
Could I say it in one word?
Yes.
Thatcherism.
Oh, wow.
No, because Thatcherism was all about sound public finances, encouraging entrepreneurship by low taxes and business-friendly regulations, and that, for me, is what it's all about. And her revolution in the 1980s was really extraordinary and absolutely necessary.
It was.
And I lived through it.
Last week we had A-level results. If you were advising a teenager today, would you recommend them to do a career in the civil service? Or maybe in banking, or something else?
Or, well, they should do what they want to do. I think the first thing is that they choose a subject that they're happy with and they enjoy and they're good at. And once you've got the subject, then you can go from there. I mean, obviously, I chose economics and statistics, and it saw me through not just the civil service, but also teaching. I did a spell as teaching, obviously the banking, and then I was in ITM, so I was sort of treading the boards, and then in policy, etc., running the CPS around the corner, and I'm back in the city now. So, I mean, it was a matter of saying, I would say to any A-level student, do what you want to do and take it from there.
Yes, I agree. We do some quickies. Beer or wine, if you have to choose?
Cider.
Good heavens.
Cheap. It's cheap.
It's also quite strong. Your favourite snack?
The odd ice cream. Just the odd ice cream.
Ideal holiday?
I have a holiday home in Cheshire near the farm, so I go back up there.
Okay. Do you have a favourite wine bar or restaurant?
Well, I belong to the Reform Club, so I go there. It's sort of nice and solid. Nothing too frivolous.
And of course, F.A. Hayek was a member.
Sorry?
F.A. Hayek was a member of the...
Oh, well, that's all the better. I didn't know that.
He would all stay there when he visited London. Do you follow any sports at all?
I like watching horses.
Really?
I think horses are splendid.
You mean horse racing?
Well, I was watching some of the York races this afternoon,
Okay.
and I think horses are splendid creatures. I mean, being brought up on a farm, anything that's got 4 legs is actually quite interesting. They're better sort of balanced because they've got 4 legs as opposed to 2.
That includes pigs.
Pigs are splendid creatures.
I agree. Have you ever shown any musical talent?
Well, I'm afraid to say I have, and I must admit one of the reasons I stayed in the civil service as long as I did is because I spent most of my time singing. And I became absolutely...
In a choir?
No, solo singing.
Okay.
I was a mezzo-soprano, and I did did some oratory, I did some opera, I did a lot of song recitals, and it was an absolute total passion of mine. And I was absolutely hooked when in the mid-60s when I heard Janet Baker sing, and she was singing the Elgar Seat Pictures, and I don't know if there are any singers here tonight, but when I heard her sing those Seat Pictures with the Halley in the Free Trade Hall in Manchester with John Barbaroli, it changed my life. I was absolutely hooked.
For many years, you've been a stern critic of the EU and very pro-Brexit. Is there any specific aspect of the EU that sent you down that road?
Well, I think the first thing was the ERM, which was clearly a policy that was going to fail, and fortunately we left on the Golden Wednesday.
Not voluntarily.
No, not voluntarily, and Mr. Soros apparently made quite a lot of money out of it. But it does strike me that that was a big mistake, and when people were talking about the euro, I thought that was a big mistake as well, and I think I was right, if I may say so.
Mistake we didn't make. The euro.
The euro. And then when it got, I was in the IOD, then of course Tony Blair agreed to the social chapter that had been included in the Maastricht Treaty, but John Major got his opt-out, but then Tony Blair agreed to it at the Amsterdam Treaty. And so we ended up with all these extra regulations coming in from Europe, which I thought were absolutely unnecessary. And bit by bit, and I think the third factor in my sort of Euroscepticism was that this is no longer where the world economy is. Yeah. This is no longer where the growth economies are. It's actually outside the European Union. And in fact, in 2010, when I was still at the CPS, Norman Blackwell and I put something called Global Vision together, which was all about having a different relationship with Europe, because the future isn't European with its saturated markets, it's all the other markets.
And Europe is shrinking, of course, as a proportion of the world's economy.
Oh, definitely. That's absolutely unquestionable.
Theresa May remembers being a naughty child by running through farmers' fields. It was about the time that crop circles appeared. I think that's where she first learned to run around in circles. As a farm girl yourself, are there any naughty things you remember?
Do you honestly expect me to answer that?
Well, you're on camera.
Do you honestly expect me to answer that?
Right, let's move on.
By the way, if I'd run in the field and I got told off,
Okay.
that's capital, that is. That's your profit margin. You don't go around wrecking corn.
These days on social media, if you say anything out of the ordinary, the lynch mob comes after you. Anyone who deviates from the politically correct gets hounded and controlled. Given that, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of society?
Well, on current trends, it's hard not to be pessimistic. But who knows, perhaps things will change. But I am certainly as critical as you are as to what the current lynch mob is. I think it's absolutely appalling. It's a liberal left intolerance which I really cannot abide. And if you do challenge it, you're regarded as a very extraordinary person indeed. And of course you and I do.
Do you think Boris Johnson has done us all a favour by not giving in a couple of weeks ago on the Burqa, by not apologising, not surrendering? Hasn't he sort of won one for people being able to speak their mind?
I think
without
so,
the lynch
yes.
mob
Oh,
silencing?
absolutely. I mean, I actually read the article.
Yeah.
And the article was actually defending the right of people to wear these things.
Mm.
And then there were one or two jokes, for goodness sake.
Liberty. We're all in favour of economic freedom. Do you think a high degree of personal liberty is a natural corollary to economic freedom?
It has to be, because after all, you're both, when you're talking, you can't actually divide them in my opinion, because it's all about leaving people to having the freedom to make their own decisions, whatever those decisions happen to be, whether they're specifically economic or whether other sites of decisions. I think they're absolutely indissoluble.
Has there been a moment in your life when you turned to free markets, like a book or an incident, or was that road to Damascus moment when you read Popper's Open Society and you say, yes, I'm one of those, or maybe Atlas Shrugged? No, there was no moment.
Well, it was actually the 1980s, because prior to that, of course, there was Butzkelism, this idea that the mixed economy was the way forward, and both parties very much had the similar sorts of policies. And it was Thatcherism that changed everything. And of course, after a bit of a rocky start, because the economy did go into recession in the early 1980s, it was quite obvious that what Thatcher was trying to do, and we've already discussed that, was absolutely right. And when I was in DTI, actually, the Secretary of State was somebody called Norman Tebbit, and he just happens to be one of my heroes. And I think between them, they changed this country.
I agree. Last question.
Last question.
You've just had another book of your own published.
Oh, a chance to advertise.
It's called Stamps as Witnesses to History. If these are postage stamps, I as a boy used to remember, you got nothing but kings and queens in succession, and occasionally a jubilee or a wedding. What's your book about?
It's about stamps as witnesses of history.
And how are stamps witnesses of history?
They are. Look, that is the coronation. Does anybody collect stamps here? That is German unification. That's 1990. Deutsche Einheit. That was the remilitarization.
So you're following world events.
Yes,
the postage
yes.
stamps that were issued to commemorate them.
Bang on,
Yeah.
bang on. He's quick, And and this is Indian independence, and that was Australian after the Second World War. Have we had our 20 minutes, or can I? Because there's quite a lot of this book too.
Well, that was another 30 seconds.
No, that's another 30 seconds. That's Eva Peron. That's your EU enlargement.
Is that really Eva Peron?
That's Eva Peron.
Wow. Okay.
Argentina, don't worry for me, Argentina. And then EU enlargement in 2004, and so it goes on. This is a must-have. This is your...
Can it be bought online from Amazon?
Probably.
And with that brief commercial, thank you very much. It's been excellent. We don't do questions from the floor at these, but Ruth stays on and chats to you downstairs over another glass of wine. Ruth, thank you so much.
My
And
Oh,
not only socialists can enjoy good champagne, so we'd like you to say
that's very
thank you
sweet of you. Thank you
for
very
a
much,
nice
Mads.
bottle of bubbly.
Thank you. I shall enjoy it. Thank you.